Isabella turned away from the door, her head held high, as the desperate mother's pleas echoed through the empty hallway. The sound of knocking faded, replaced by the click of Isabella's Louboutins on the marble floor. She paused, a flicker of unease crossing her perfectly made-up face, before shaking it off and striding towards her study. "Mrs. Ashworth, your event planner is on line 1, her assistant called from the foyer. "Thank you, Gretchen. I'll take it in my office." Isabella's voice was crisp, betraying none of the discomfort that lingered beneath the surface. As she settled into her plush leather chair, Isabella's gaze fell on the framed photo of her and Charles at last year's charity gala. Their smiles gleamed, a perfect facade of marital bliss and philanthropic success. She lifted the receiver, pushing thoughts of the desperate woman from her mind. "Clarissa, darling, how are the preparations coming along?" While Isabella immersed herself in the details of the upcoming gala, Charles paced in his home office, phone pressed to his ear. "I told you it's handled," he hissed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "She won't be a problem anymore. Just make sure the transfer goes through as planned." He ended the call abruptly as Isabella's voice drifted down the hallway. Schooling his features into a mask of calm, Charles emerged from his sanctuary. "Everything all right, dear?" Isabella asked, eyeing him with a hint of suspicion. Charles forced a smile. "Just a bit of business. Nothing to worry about. How are the gala plans coming along?" Isabella launched into a detailed explanation of centerpieces and seating arrangements, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Charles's eyes darted away, his responses clipped and distracted. Later that evening, as Isabella sorted through the day's mail, an envelope caught her eye. It was addressed to Charles, but the return address was unfamiliar. Her curiosity piqued. She slid a perfectly manicured nail under the flap. The contents made her blood run cold. It was a notice of unpaid child support addressed to Charles for a child named Sophie. The mother's name jumped out at her, Maya. Isabella's mind raced. Charles had no children, at least none that she knew of. She tucked the letter into her desk drawer, heart pounding. This had to be a mistake, a mix-up of some kind. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The next day, Isabella met her friend Margaret for lunch at their usual spot, an exclusive rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. "You seem distracted, Izzy," Margaret observed, sipping her champagne. "Trouble in paradise." Isabella hesitated, then pulled out the letter. "I found this yesterday. It's addressed to Charles." Margaret's eyes widened as she scanned the document. "Oh, darling. This is quite the pickle, isn't it? What should I do, Maggie? Should I confront him?" Margaret leaned in, her voice low. "Listen to me, Izzy. You have a reputation to maintain. If this gets out, it could ruin everything you've worked for. My advice, forget you ever saw it. Some stones are better left unturned." Isabella nodded, but the unease in her stomach only grew. That night, as Charles prepared for bed, Isabella steeled herself for the confrontation. "Charles, we need to talk." He turned, a flicker of alarm in his eyes. "What about, dear?" Isabella produced the letter. "Care to explain this?" Charles's face paled, then hardened. "Where did you get that? Have you been going through my things?" "It came in the mail, Charles. Don't try to turn this around on me. Who is Maya? And who is Sophie?" Charles's jaw clenched. "It's nothing, Isabella. Just a misunderstanding with an old business associate. I'll take care of it." "A business associate who needs child support?" Isabella's voice rose. "Do you think I'm stupid, Charles?" "Drop it, Isabella. This doesn't concern you." Charles's tone was icy, a warning in his eyes. The argument hung between them, unresolved and festering. Isabella tossed and turned that night, her mind racing. She knew there was more to the story, and she was determined to uncover the truth. The next day, while Charles was at work, Isabella slipped into his office. She told herself it was wrong, an invasion of privacy, but the need to know outweighed her guilt. As she rifled through his desk drawers, her hand closed around a thick manila envelope. Inside, she found a treasure trove of damning information. bank statements showing regular transfers to an account in Maya's name. Old photos of a younger Charles with a pregnant woman. Maya, she assumed. And most damning of all, a birth certificate for Sophie, listing Charles as the father. Isabella sank into Charles's chair, her world spinning. The pieces fell into place. The woman at the door, the one she dismissed so coldly, must have been Maya. And Sophie. Sophie was Charles's daughter, a daughter he'd abandoned. As the reality of Charles's deception sank in, Isabella's phone buzzed. It was Margaret. "Izzy, darling, I've been thinking about your little situation. I really think the best thing to do is to forget all about it. After all, what good could come from dredging up the past?" Isabella's grip on the phone tightened. "Maggie, I found out more. It's worse than we thought." "Oh, Izzy?" Margaret sighed. "Whatever it is it really worth risking your reputation? Think of all you have to lose." As Margaret's words washed over her, Isabella's gaze fell on a framed photo on Charles's desk. It was from their wedding day, both of them beaming at the camera. But now, all she could see was the lie behind Charles's smile. "I have to go, Maggie," Isabella said abruptly, ending the call. She sat there, surrounded by the evidence of Charles's betrayal, torn between the life she'd built and the ugly truth she'd uncovered. The charity gala loomed, a symbol of the perfect life she'd cultivated. But now, that life felt hollow, built on a foundation of lies and deceit. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the office, Isabella made a decision. She couldn't ignore this, couldn't pretend it away. Whatever the cost, she had to confront Charles and face the truth head-on. The sound of the front door opening jolted her from her thoughts. Charles was home. Taking a deep breath, Isabella gathered the documents and steeled herself for the confrontation that would change everything. She stepped out of the office, her heart pounding. "Charles," she called, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "We need to talk. Now." Isabella's world spun off its axis as she confronted Charles, the evidence of his betrayal clutched in her trembling hands. The pristine walls of their mansion seemed to close in, suffocating her with the weight of lies and deceit. "How could you?" Her voice cracked, a mixture of fury and anguish. "A daughter, Charles, a whole other life you've hidden from me." Charles's face contorted, a mask of indifference slipping to reveal a flicker of panic. "You're blowing this out of proportion, Isabella. It was a mistake a long time ago. I've handled it." "Handled it?" Isabella's laugh was bitter, bordering on hysteria. "By abandoning them, by lying to me for years." Charles's eyes hardened, his tone shifting from placating to defensive. "What I do with my money is my business. You had no right to go through my things. Your business." Isabella's voice rose, echoing through the cavernous foyer. "We're married, Charles. Your secrets became my business the moment you said I do." The argument raged on, each accusation and denial driving a deeper wedge between them. As night fell, Isabella retreated to the guest room, her mind reeling from the revelations. Sleep eluded her, replaced by a parade of memories now tainted by doubt. Every business trip, every late night at the office. How many of those had been lies? The perfect life she'd cultivated suddenly felt as fragile as spun glass. Morning brought no respite. Isabella moved through her daily routine like a ghost, her thoughts a constant whirlwind of questions and recriminations. The upcoming charity gala loomed large, a symbol of the facade she'd maintained for so long. Her phone buzzed incessantly with messages from Margaret, each one a not-so-subtle reminder of the importance of keeping up appearances. "Darling, whatever's going on with Charles, you simply must put on a brave face for the gala. Think of all the good we're doing." Isabella's finger hovered over the reply button, a scathing retort on the tip of her tongue. Instead, she let the phone clatter to the marble countertop, turning her attention to the window. Outside, life continued as normal. Gardeners tended to the immaculate lawn, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing within the mansion's walls. For a moment, Isabella allowed herself to imagine a different life, one without the constant pressure of perfection, without the weight of secrets. The sound of Charles's car in the driveway snapped her back to reality. She steeled herself for another confrontation, determined to get answers. But Charles breezed past her, his attention fixed on his phone. "Can't talk now, dear. Important call." The dismissal stung, fueling Isabella's growing resolve. She wouldn't be ignored, wouldn't let this lie fester any longer. As the days passed, Isabella found herself noticing things she'd overlooked before. Late-night phone calls in hushed tones. Unexplained charges on credit card statements. Each discovery added another crack to the foundation of trust she'd built her life upon. The night of the gala arrived, a glittering affair that felt more like a battlefield than a celebration. Isabella plastered on her society smile, but her eyes scanned the crowd, wondering how many other secrets lurked beneath the polished veneer of high society. Charles worked the room with practiced ease, but Isabella caught the tension in his shoulders, the way his gaze darted nervously whenever she approached. "You two seem a bit off tonight." Margaret sidled up, champagne flute in hand. "Trouble in paradise." Isabella's grip tightened on her own glass. "Everything's fine, Maggie. Just pre-event jitters." Margaret's eyes narrowed, not buying the lie for a second. "Remember what I said, darling. Some things are better left buried, for everyone's sake." The warning hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Isabella excused herself, suddenly desperate for air. She found refuge on a secluded balcony, the cool night breeze a welcome relief from the stifling atmosphere inside. But her solitude was short-lived. "There you are." Charles's voice carried an edge of irritation. "People are starting to talk. Pull yourself together." Something inside Isabella snapped. Years of playing the perfect wife, of swallowing her doubts and questions, came rushing to the surface. "Pull myself together." She whirled to face him, voice low but intense. "You want me to pretend everything's fine when our entire marriage is built on lies?" Charles's eyes darted around, checking for eavesdroppers. "Keep your voice down. You're being hysterical." Hysterical. Isabella's laugh was sharp, cutting. "You abandoned your own child, Charles. You've been lying to me for years, and you have the audacity to call me hysterical." Charles's facade cracked, revealing a glimpse of the ruthlessness beneath. "You don't understand. I did what I had to do to protect what we have. To protect you. Protect me." Isabella recoiled. "From what?" "The truth. Your own daughter." "From a mess." Charles hissed. "Do you have any idea what a scandal like this would do to us? To our reputation? Everything we've built would crumble." Isabella stared at him, truly seeing him for the first time. "You're more worried about our reputation than your own flesh and blood." Charles's silence was damning. "Want to meet her," Isabella declared, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Maya and Sophie." "Absolutely not." Charles's tone brooked no argument. "I've kept them away for a reason. They're not a part of our world." "They're a part of yours," Isabella countered, "which makes them a part of mine." The tension between them was palpable, crackling with unspoken threats and accusations. Finally, Charles's shoulders sagged, a flicker of defeat crossing his face. "Fine. You want to meet them? Go ahead. But don't say I didn't warn you. Some stones are better left unturned." With that, he turned on his heel, leaving Isabella alone on the balcony. She leaned against the railing, her mind racing. She'd won this battle, but at what cost? The next morning, Isabella steeled herself for the meeting that would change everything. She'd arranged to meet Maya at a small cafe, far from the prying eyes of their social circle. As she approached the table, her heart clenched at the sight of the young woman, tired, wary, but with a fierce determination in her eyes. Beside her sat a little girl, no more than 5 or 6, coloring contentedly. "Mrs. Ashworth." Maya's voice was cool, guarded. "I have to admit, I was surprised to hear from you." Isabella took a deep breath, pushing aside the guilt that threatened to overwhelm her. "Please, call me Isabella. I owe you an apology. For everything." Maya's eyebrows rose, surprise replacing some of the wariness. "You do. I do. Isabella nodded. I've recently learned some truths about my husband, your father, she added, glancing at Sophie. And I realize now how wrong I've been, how we've both wronged you. Maya's posture softened slightly, but her guard remained up. Why now? After all this time? Isabella's gaze fell on Sophie, who looked up from her coloring book with curious eyes. In that moment, she saw a glimpse of Charles, not the man he'd become, but the man she thought she'd married. Kind, caring. The man she'd fallen in love with. Because it's time for the truth to come out, Isabella said softly. All of it. As Maya began to share her story, the years of struggle, the constant rejection, the desperate attempts to make Charles take responsibility, Isabella felt her resolve harden. She'd been complicit in this injustice, however unknowingly. Now, it was time to make things right. But as she listened, a chill ran down her spine. Maya's words painted a picture far darker than she'd imagined. Charles hadn't just abandoned them. He'd actively worked to keep them struggling, to prevent them from reaching out. He what? Isabella's voice shook. Maya's eyes were hard, years of pain and anger shining through. He blocked every attempt we made to contact him, threatened legal action if we persisted. Even when Sophie was sick and we needed help with medical bills, her voice trailed off, choked with emotion. Sophie looked up, concern etched on her young face. Mom, are you okay? Maya forced a smile, running a hand through her daughter's hair. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just talking about grown-up things. Isabella's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of truth she'd uncovered. The secret bank transfers, the legal documents hidden away. It all made a horrifying kind of sense. I had no idea, she whispered, more to herself than to Maya. All this time, I thought, I believed. Maya's gaze softened slightly. You really didn't know, did you? Isabella shook her head, fighting back tears. No, but I do now. And I promise you, things are going to change. As she left the cafe, Isabella's resolve hardened into steel. The life she'd built, the reputation she'd cultivated, none of it mattered in the face of this injustice. It was time to tear down the facade and face the ugly truth beneath. She pulled out her phone, ignoring the flurry of messages from Margaret and her other society friends. Instead, she dialed a number she'd never thought she'd need. Hello. Yes, I'd like to speak with a divorce attorney. It's urgent. The die was cast. There was no going back now. Isabella's world crumbled around her, the pristine walls of her mansion now a gilded cage. She paced the length of her bedroom, phone clutched in her trembling hand, as the news anchor's voice filled the air. Breaking news. Prominent businessman Charles Ashworth faces allegations of financial misconduct. Sources close to the investigation suggest. The TV clicked off, plunging the room into silence. Isabella's breath came in short, ragged gasps. The rumors she'd dismissed, the whispers she'd ignored, they were all coming to light. A sharp knock at the door made her jump. Mrs. Ashworth, there's a reporter here to see you. Isabella's heart raced. Tell them I'm not available, Gretchen. They're quite insistent, ma'am. They say they have information about Mr. Ashworth that you'll want to hear. The walls seemed to close in. Isabella's carefully constructed life was unraveling thread by thread. She smoothed her hair, straightened her spine, and opened the door. Send them in. The reporter, a sharp-eyed woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, wasted no time on pleasantries. Mrs. Ashworth, I'm here about your husband's dealings with Horizon Investments. Are you aware of the extent of his involvement? Isabella's mask of composure slipped for a moment. I'm afraid I don't discuss my husband's business affairs. The reporter's eyes narrowed. Even when those affairs involve embezzlement and fraud on a massive scale. The room spun. Isabella gripped the back of a chair, her knuckles white. I think you should leave. Mrs. Ashworth, the public has a right to know. Your husband's actions have ruined lives. Families have lost everything. And there's more. A woman named Maya has come forward with claims that Mr. Ashworth. Enough! Isabella's voice cracked. Please, just go. As the door closed behind the reporter, Isabella's phone buzzed. A text from Maya. We need to talk. It's urgent. Across town, in a rundown apartment complex, Maya paced nervously. Sophie watched from the couch, her small face creased with worry. Mommy, are we going to have to move again? Maya's heart clenched. I don't know, sweetheart, but I promise, whatever happens, we'll be okay. A knock at the door made them both jump. Maya opened it cautiously, relief flooding her face as she saw Isabella. You came. Isabella nodded, her eyes taking in the sparse furnishings, the peeling wallpaper. Maya, I had no idea things were this bad. Maya's laugh was bitter. Welcome to the real world, Mrs. Ashworth. As they talked, the full extent of Charles's deception became clear. He hadn't just abandoned Maya and Sophie. He'd actively worked to keep them in poverty, blocking every attempt at legal recourse. But why? Isabella's voice shook. Why go to such lengths? Maya's eyes hardened. Because we were a threat to his perfect life. To your perfect life. The words hit Isabella like a physical blow. She thought of all the charity galas, the social events where she'd played the role of the devoted wife. How many lives had been destroyed to maintain that illusion? I'm so sorry, Maya, for everything. But I promise you, things are going to change. As Isabella left the apartment, her resolve hardened. She knew what she had to do, no matter the cost. Back at the mansion, Charles paced in his study, phone pressed to his ear. I don't care what it takes. Make it go away. Use whatever means necessary. He hung up as Isabella entered, his face a mask of concern. Darling, where have you been? I've been worried sick with all these rumors flying around. Isabella met his gaze steadily. I was with Maya and Sophie. Charles's facade cracked, revealing a flash of anger. I told you to stay away from them. They're nothing but trouble. Trouble. Isabella's voice rose. They're your family, Charles. Your daughter and granddaughter, living in squalor while we. They are not my family. Charles roared, his composure finally shattering. You are my family. This life, everything we've built. That's what matters. Isabella recoiled, seeing Charles truly for the first time. How can you say that? How can you turn your back on your own child? Charles's eyes were cold, calculating. I did what I had to do to protect us. To protect you. Protect me. Isabella laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. You've been lying to me for years, using my money to cover up your crimes. Charles's face paled. What are you talking about? Isabella pulled out a stack of documents. I've seen the bank statements, Charles. The transfers from our joint accounts to offshore holdings. Did you think I wouldn't notice? For a moment, Charles looked cornered. Then his expression hardened. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Isabella. Stay out of this. For your own good. The threat hung in the air between them. Isabella stood her ground, even as fear clawed at her insides. No, Charles. I won't stay out of it. Not anymore. As she turned to leave, Charles grabbed her arm. Don't do anything stupid, Isabella. Remember, you're as much a part of this life as I am. If I go down, you go down with me. Isabella wrenched her arm free, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Then let me fall. She stormed out, leaving Charles seething in the study. As she reached for her phone to call her lawyer, a text from an unknown number made her blood run cold. Mrs. Ashworth, we have information about your husband's dealings that you need to see. Meet us at the abandoned warehouse on 5th and Main. Come alone. Isabella hesitated, her instincts screaming danger. But the need for answers, for a way out of this nightmare, overrode her caution. The warehouse loomed before her, a hulking shadow in the fading light. Isabella's heels echoed on the concrete as she entered, her heart pounding. Hello. Is anyone here? A figure stepped from the shadows, not the mysterious informant she'd expected, but Charles. His face was twisted with rage and desperation. I warned you to stay out of this, Isabella. She backed away, fear rising in her throat. Charles, what are you doing? protecting what's mine. He advanced, his intent clear in every line of his body. I won't let you destroy everything I've worked for. As Charles lunged forward, Isabella's world narrowed to a pinpoint of terror and survival. She ducked, narrowly avoiding his grasp, and ran. The chase through the warehouse was a blur of fear and adrenaline. Isabella's designer heels clattered on the concrete, each echo a reminder of how far she'd fallen from her carefully curated life. She rounded a corner, gasping for breath, and found herself face to face with Maya. Maya, were you? Saving you. Maya cut her off, grabbing Isabella's arm and pulling her towards a hidden exit. As they burst into the cool night air, police sirens wailed in the distance. Maya's face was grim. I couldn't let him hurt you. Not after everything. Isabella's mind reeled. But how did you know? Maya's smile was sad. I've been watching Charles for years, gathering evidence. When I saw you were finally breaking free, I knew I had to help. As the police cars screeched to a halt, Isabella felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. The life she'd known was over, but in its place, something new and genuine was taking root. Charles emerged from the warehouse, his face a mask of fury as he was surrounded by officers. His eyes locked on Isabella, a mixture of betrayal and desperation in his gaze. Isabella, please, don't do this. We can still fix this. She met his gaze steadily, her voice calm despite the turmoil within. No, Charles, we can't. It's time for the truth to come out. As Charles was led away in handcuffs, Isabella turned to Maya. The two women, once worlds apart, now stood united in the face of adversity. What happens now? Isabella asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Maya squeezed her hand. We rebuild, together. The night air was thick with possibility and the promise of a new beginning. As Isabella watched her old life crumble, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in years, she felt truly free. Isabella's hands trembled as she read the eviction notice. Maya's desperate voice echoed through the phone. We have nowhere else to go. Sophie. She's scared. The weight of her gilded life crashed down on Isabella's shoulders. She glanced around her opulent living room, each expensive trinket a mockery of the struggle Maya and Sophie faced. Pack your things. Isabella's voice was steady, resolute. You're coming to stay with me. Silence hung on the line for a heartbeat. Isabella, we can't. You can, and you will. Isabella's tone brooked no argument. It's time I made things right. As she ended the call, Isabella steeled herself for the confrontation to come. Charles's key in the lock sent her heart racing. He strode in, reeking of whiskey and desperation. Isabella, darling, we need to talk about. No. The word cut through the air like a whip. We're done talking, Charles. I want you out. Charles's face contorted, a mask of confusion giving way to rage. What are you talking about? This is my house. Not anymore. Isabella's voice was ice. I've spoken to my lawyers. Given your indiscretions, I'm well within my rights to remove you from the premises. Charles lunged forward, grabbing Isabella's arm. You ungrateful bitch. After everything I've done for you. Isabella wrenched free, her eyes blazing. Everything you've done? You mean lie, cheat, abandon your own child. I told you to stay out of that. Charles roared, his composure shattering completely. Or what? Isabella stood her ground, years of pent-up anger fueling her courage. You'll ruin me? News flash. Charles, you already have. Security guards appeared in the doorway, summoned by a silent alarm Isabella had triggered. Charles's eyes darted between them and his wife, realization dawning. You can't do this, he snarled, backing away. You're nothing without me. Isabella's smile was cold. Watch me. As Charles was escorted from the premises, hurling threats and obscenities, Isabella felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had one more call to make. Margaret, it's Isabella. I'm afraid I won't be attending the charity gala this weekend, or any others for that matter. Margaret's gasp was audible. Darling, what are you saying? You can't just. I can, and I am. Isabella's voice softened. I'm sorry, Maggie, but I've realized there are more important things in life than maintaining appearances. With that, Isabella hung up, cutting ties with the superficial world she'd once cherished. Hours later, a tentative knock at the door heralded Maya and Sophie's arrival. Isabella opened it to find them huddled together, a few meager bags at their feet. Come in. Isabella stepped aside, her heart aching at the fear and uncertainty in their eyes. You're safe now. As she showed them to their rooms, guest suites larger than Maya's entire apartment, Isabella felt a surge of determination. This was just the beginning. Over the following weeks, Isabella threw herself into righting Charles's wrongs. She hired the best lawyers money could buy, not to protect herself, but to ensure Charles faced justice for his crimes. Mrs. Ashworth, her lead attorney's voice crackled through the speakerphone. I have some news about your husband's financial dealings. Isabella braced herself. Go on. It's worse than we thought. We've uncovered evidence of massive fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. Charles wasn't just hiding money from Maya. He was stealing from dozens of investors. The revelation hit Isabella like a physical blow. She thought of all the charity events, the social gatherings where Charles had played the role of benevolent businessman. How many lives had he ruined? What can we do? Isabella's voice was steady, despite the turmoil within. With your testimony and the evidence we've gathered, we can ensure he faces the full extent of the law. But Mrs. Ashworth, you should be prepared. This will be a media circus. Isabella closed her eyes, steeling herself for the storm to come. Do it. Whatever it takes to make this right. As the legal proceedings unfolded, Isabella focused on rebuilding her life and Maya's. She used her connections and resources to help Maya find a job, enroll Sophie in a good school, and secure a future that had once seemed impossible. One sunny afternoon, as Isabella watched Sophie play in the garden, Maya joined her on the patio. I never thought I'd see her so happy. Maya's voice was thick with emotion. Thank you, Isabella, for everything. Isabella shook her head, a lump forming in her throat. No, thank you. You've shown me what really matters in life. Their moment of peace was interrupted by the shrill ring of Isabella's phone. It was her lawyer again. Mrs. Ashworth, I have news. The jury has reached a verdict. Isabella's heart raced as she listened to the outcome. Charles had been found guilty on all counts. The man who had once seemed untouchable would spend years behind bars. As she relayed the news to Maya, a mix of emotions played across the younger woman's face: relief, vindication, and a hint of sadness for what might have been. It's over, Maya whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. He can't hurt us anymore. Isabella squeezed her hand. No, he can't. But this isn't an ending. It's a beginning. In the days that followed, Isabella faced a barrage of media attention. Former friends and socialites clamored for interviews, eager to distance themselves from Charles's crimes or capitalize on the scandal. But Isabella stood firm, using her platform to shed light on the victims of financial fraud and the importance of supporting single parents. She transformed her charity work, focusing on causes that truly made a difference rather than just maintaining appearances. As the dust settled, Isabella found herself at a crossroads. The life she'd known was gone, but in its place, something far more meaningful had taken root. One evening, as she sat on the patio watching the sunset, Sophie's laughter drifted from the garden. The little girl was chasing fireflies, her face alight with joy. Maya joined Isabella, a contented smile on her face. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm happy, truly happy. Isabella felt a warmth spread through her chest. So am I. As they watched Sophie play, Isabella realized that in trying to save Maya and her daughter, she had saved herself. The facade of perfection she'd clung to for so long had crumbled, revealing a strength and compassion she never knew she possessed. You know, Isabella mused, her eyes twinkling, maybe I was the one who needed saving all along. Maya laughed, a sound free from the burden of past struggles. Maybe we all did. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Isabella felt a profound sense of peace wash over her. The road ahead would not be easy. There were still challenges to face and wounds to heal. But for the first time in years, she felt truly alive. She had lost the life she thought she wanted, but gained something far more precious, a family built on love, trust, and second chances. Sophie's voice rang out, full of wonder. Look, a shooting star. Isabella and Maya exchanged glances, then closed their eyes, making silent wishes. But as Isabella opened hers, she realized she didn't need to wish for anything. Everything she needed was right here. The perfect life she'd once pursued now seemed hollow in comparison to the genuine joy and purpose she'd found. In letting go of appearances and embracing the messy, beautiful truth of human connection, Isabella had discovered a happiness beyond anything she'd ever imagined. As Sophie ran to them, fireflies dancing in her wake, Isabella opened her arms wide. The little family, unexpected, unconventional, and utterly perfect, embraced under the starlit sky, ready to face whatever the future might bring, together.